Join me as I show you how to install your Arula window. This concept is all about bringing the big balloon forward and into the space and using your smaller balloons behind and inside your frame to create some depth. So at this stage, I've got my backdrop put up in the window and I'm ready to start installing my hanging elements and my wall elements. Before I get started, I want to take a look at the scenario that I've chosen as my guideline for this install. So I've already walked the front of the store, considered the customer's perspective, and I feel like this scenario is probably the best for my situation. So taking a look at what we have here, we've got the frame that's sort of centered in the middle of the composition. It's kind of our grounding element for everything. And I want to start there with my install because all the other elements sort of come in relation to that. And the frame is narrow, which will allow me to get back and forth in the window space. As I'm looking at this, I want to plan my in and out strategy as well. So let's say our way in and out of the window is over here on this side. That would mean I probably want to start over here with installing my bigger elements. The large balloon takes up most of the window space. So I definitely want to get that in before I have to pass the ladder back onto the other side of it. So I'm gonna get my frame up, I'll come in and install this smallest balloon that's on the furthest side. Then my big balloon will go in, and then I can install the two smaller balloons without having to pass my ladder through the window again. So with all of that planned out, let's get started. To start installing your frame, get your ladder, your monofilament, scissors, and some track hooks. Place your frame in the window about where you want it to go. We're aiming for centered here, so this looks about right, and you can just lean it against the wall to hold it up. I'm gonna start by taking my monofilament and tying it to the D-ring that's attached on the back of the frame. Can't see. Now I'm going to place my track hook above the edge of the frame, about where I think it's going to go. For now, I'm keeping this really close to the back wall so that I can get through easily as I'm working. But depending on your window depth, you may be able to bring your frame out closer to the glass and have a little more space between your frame and wall. So to start here, I'm going to take my monofilament, run it up to the track hook, and then bring my ladder and my monofilament down to the other end of the frame. I'm going to go ahead and cut the other end of the monofilament, making sure I have enough for one continuous piece that goes from that end of the frame to the hook, all the way across and back down to the other D-ring on this side of the frame. Gonna place my hook. So at this stage, I haven't tied it off yet, and you can see I can raise this end of my frame all the way up using the monofilament kind of like a pulley. So I'm gonna bring this corner of the frame all the way up to the ceiling and then tie it off. Be sure you do at least 3 or 4 knots in your monofilament to make sure that it doesn't come untied or slip out. So once that feels like it's staying, you can see now, because this is all one piece, I can adjust my frame to get it level. And I can also move the track hooks left and right to make sure that the frame is actually centered. So at this point, I'm gonna trim my excess string off. And I'm gonna step down to check that my frame is level this way and that it's centered from left to right. When you're ready to hang your small balloon, start by passing your monofilament in between two of the ribs and out the opposite side. You want to make sure that you're going through two spaces that are exactly opposite each other. That's going to make your balloon hang level. So I'm going to pass my string through, go ahead and tie this off at the top. I'm gonna knot this at least 3 or 4 times just so my monofilament doesn't slip. All right, now you can see that's nice and secure. We have our long string that's gonna go up to the ceiling, and I'm gonna trim away the excess cord. So I've got my ladder in the window space. We're gonna be hanging the balloon right in here, according to our composition guide. So I've got the long end of the monofilament in this hand. I'm going to place my track hook here about where I want the balloon. The great thing is these are all adjustable. So if you get it approximately where you want it, you can double check later on. I'm going to pass the monofilament through the track hook, get it about where I want it, and it's about halfway through from floor to ceiling. That looks pretty good. So I'm going to trim that, go ahead and tie this off. Again, I'm doing like 3 to 4 knots just so that nothing slips and comes out. And we're trimming any of our excess monofilament as we go. Keep everything looking nice and tidy. So now my balloon's hanging here. If I need to adjust this at all to make sure that my balloon's hanging straight, you can slide that first loop you made over and get the knot right in the center of the balloon, and that way it's gonna hang straight up and down. Looks good. To hang your large half balloon, you'll need your monofilament, and we're gonna pass the cut end around these 2 front ribs. So I'm going in this side, out this side, and just like before, I'm gonna tie this into a loop that goes around those 2 ribs. Okay, that feels good. So I'm gonna trim off this little extra tail. After you've tied your monofilament to the top of the balloon, go ahead and add a screw right into the middle of the ring piece of the balloon. So we're gonna go straight in here. This is going to help us level out our balloon once we get it hung. Drive the screw in most of the way, but make sure the head of the screw is sticking out just enough so that you can tie some monofilament around it. Bring the large balloon into your window space and place it approximately where it's going to hang. Now I'm gonna climb up my ladder. I've got the long end of the monofilament and my track hook ready. I'm gonna place this about where I think the middle of the balloon is going to be. And then I'm going to pass the monofilament through the hook and use it to start hoisting the balloon in place. Let's see. So according to my reference image, the top of the balloon is about 6 inches under the top of the frame. That looks about right to me. So I'm gonna go ahead and tie this off. It'll settle down a little bit as you're tying, but just get it back in place in between your knots, and eventually it'll stop sliding down. All right, so that is secure. Now I'm gonna step outside real quick and make sure that I like the placement and the height of this before I move on to my next balloon and before I finish leveling it. So I've stepped outside of my window and looked at the position of my balloon. The height looks good to me, but I've noticed in my reference photo, the right side of the balloon is outside of the frame just a little bit. I want to adjust that because the effect looks really cool and sort of helps to build some dimension and some layers. So I'm going to scoot that over till the outside of my balloon is just outside of the frame. That looks pretty good. I've adjusted the levelness of the balloon by sliding it along the first loop that we created when we hung it. So I've got my knot centered in between the two ribs, which makes the balloon hang level from left to right. The last thing we need to do is to sort of correct the way that the balloon is pitching forward. And that's why we put our screw in to the middle of that ring. So what I'm gonna do now is tie a little loop of monofilament around the screw. Now take the other end of the monofilament and pass it up to the same track hook that the balloon is hanging from. So from here, I can pull on the loose end of the monofilament and see that it corrects that forward lean on the balloon. What we're after is the back of the balloon being parallel to the wall, so just straight up and down all the way to the floor. And that'll also keep your balloon from spinning once it's tied off. That looks pretty level to me, so I'm gonna go ahead and tie this. Since we're working our way out of our window, now is a great time to go ahead and put the clouds on our backdrop. Then all we have to do is come in, hang our last two balloons, and place our text. Let's start by attaching the spacers to the back of our clouds. You'll need your cloud shape and your spacer pieces with the edges painted in the cotton blossom color. So placing a spacer on each end of the cloud, we're going to line it up, making sure that the spacer doesn't hang over the edge anywhere. Looks pretty good. And we're gonna place one pin on each side of the spacer. I'm angling through the block and into the cloud. So I'm gonna go all the way around on all four sides. So now we have our clouds up on the wall and we've hung our last two balloons in the window. I'm happy with the placement of everything, so the only thing left to do is to add the text. In the next section, we're going to show you how to use your template and get the text put on the wall.